The afternoon sun fell gently over the city, coloring the busy streets in gold and creating soft shadows that stretched along the pavements. Amid this urban landscape, Henry, a young man with a free spirit and an attentive gaze, moved with the determination of someone who had already lived many stories. Some paid for, others only lived intensely. For some time, Henry had worked as an escort, offering his company to those who sought refuge from loneliness and the hectic routine of everyday life. His talent for listening, his discreet charm, and his ability to transform ephemeral moments into memorable experiences had made him stand out in that milieu. However, everything began to change in Henry's life on the day he met Edward. Edward, a middle-aged man, sophisticated with an aura of security and a calm voice that inspired confidence, was the typical sugar daddy many had imagined. But to Henry, Edward proved to be something far more complex. In their first meetings, the young man could not have imagined that relationship, initially based on a financial exchange, would transform into something so intense and true. At first, their meetings followed a well-established routine. Henry would meet Edward in cozy restaurants, intimate cafes, or even at dinners in discreet houses. Each encounter was marked by light dialogue, during which Edward always showed an almost paternal attentiveness, yet at the same time a sincere admiration for the dreams and challenges Henry faced. Edward's gaze often lingered on the young man's face, as if he wanted to read every nuance of his soul, while Henry, in turn, was enchanted by the way the older man spoke about life, his experiences, and even his faults. At one of these meetings, seated at the table of a small bistro, Henry was surprised by the tender tone with which Edward commented on the importance of being authentic. "Henry, life is made up of meetings and farewells, but what really matters is what we leave in people's hearts. Do not let money dictate the value of who you are," Edward said, his eyes fixed on Henry's. These words echoed in the young man's mind, who until then had seen his work as merely functional. Gradually, Henry began to question the routine he had built. With each new meeting, the sparkle in Edward's eyes, the way he held his hand, the looks they exchanged with such intensity, deepened the feeling. It was no longer just a transaction. It was something that hinted between the lines of their dialogues and the silent moments they shared. The connection intensified subtly. In one meeting after another, Henry realized that the affection shown by Edward went beyond commercial logic. Instead of seeing the young man merely as an object of desire, Edward treated him as an equal, valuing every gesture, every word, every sigh of complicity. Henry, who had always been practical and rational, began to feel that this sentiment was blossoming organically, unhurriedly, as if fate were uniting them for something greater. On an autumn afternoon, while the leaves fell slowly along the sidewalks, the two met at Edward's house, which possessed a welcoming atmosphere, with walls lined with books and windows that allowed natural light to flood the rooms. Henry had initially gone for a casual dinner, but upon arriving he noticed that there was something different in the air. Edward, already prepared to welcome him, displayed a warm smile and a look that overflowed with affection. After dinner, as they talked in the living room, the conversation turned to more personal topics. Edward spoke of the challenges he had faced in his youth, the choices he had made, and, above all, the importance of surrendering oneself to love without reservations. Henry listened attentively, feeling that each word strengthened the bond forming between them. Gradually, the intimate and quiet atmosphere of the room made them draw physically closer, without any rush or exaggerated expectation. That very day, as night settled in and the shadows danced on the walls, the mood changed subtly. Henry and Edward found themselves sitting on the sofa side by side. There was a delicate tension, an energy that made every touch, every look carry a message far beyond simple affection. In a moment of comfortable silence, their eyes met, and Henry's heart raced. I confess that I was left speechless. Truly, I had judged him by his manner, but as the days passed, I began to realize that man was much more than I had imagined. We continued talking about trivial matters until, in a cozy corner of the room, the atmosphere became charged with a silent intention. I fell silent, watching as he leaned in slightly and looked at me with that smile that now seemed to hold far more intention. "Come on, I missed you," Edward whispered, his voice low and full of feeling. I returned the smile, feeling the sincerity and affection in his words. "Come on, I missed you too," I replied, convinced that moment was the realization of something both of us had been waiting for. Unhurriedly, this instant carried a natural complicity. It was no longer a relationship based solely on financial agreements. It was pure pleasure, unhurried, without commitment, driven solely by mutual desire and the affection that was blossoming in our hearts. We spent hours together, talking, laughing, and surrendering to the moment as if time had stopped just for us. When it came time to say goodbye, neither of us needed words to express what we felt. Our glances said it all. That night marked the beginning of a transformation in Henry's life. Gradually, the young man began to rethink the value of his work and the nature of the relationships he maintained. Edward's sincere affection and the way he treated him made Henry realize that true love is not measured in numbers. It was then that, at one of the subsequent meetings, Henry made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. The next day, when meeting Edward for the usual lunch, Henry looked into the man's eyes and in a firm voice said, "Edward, I can't do this anymore. Today I have decided that I will no longer charge for my company. I want to be with you because I want to be with you, not for something that can be measured or transacted." Edward remained silent for a few moments, surprised and moved by the sincerity of the declaration. His eyes shone, reflecting both gratitude and a deep admiration for the young man. "Henry, that means a great deal to me. It means that you have chosen love, affection, instead of seeing everything as a business." Thus, at that moment, a new phase in the relationship was sealed. The agreement that had previously been governed by silent contracts and tacit understandings was replaced by something far more valuable, the genuine sentiment that united them. And from that day on, every meeting was celebrated not for the money involved but for the exchange of emotions, the complicity of gestures and the purity of a love that developed with the natural flow of time. The following days overflowed with small moments that reinforced Henry's decision. On a walk through the park, while the trees whispered secrets to the wind and the sun played hide-and-seek with the clouds, the two lost themselves in a conversation that made them both laugh and cry at the same time. Henry, opening up about his fears and ambitions, found in Edward not only a lover but a friend, a mentor, and someone who made him feel complete. Edward, for his part, showed an almost paternal care, but also an intense passion that went beyond conventional limits. On a rainy afternoon, while the city sheltered under colorful umbrellas, the two met at Edward's house for a coffee. The rain tapped softly on the windows, creating a soundtrack that kept time with their hearts. Sitting together on the carpet in the living room, with steaming cups in their hands, they surrendered to the comfortable silence that only true lovers know. "Have you ever stopped to think how unpredictable life is?" Henry asked, his gaze lost in the droplets sliding down the glass. "Yes, and I have learnt that the best surprises happen when we least expect them," replied Edward, gently holding Henry's hand. Every touch, every sigh, was a reminder that that feeling, once diluted in agreements and transactions, was now free to blossom unrestrained. Love at that moment was as tangible as the aroma of the coffee and as gentle as the melody of the rain. As the weeks passed, the intimacy between them deepened. Their meetings were always accompanied by an exchange of glances that revealed more than words could say. One night, after a dinner prepared with care by Edward, the two found themselves on the balcony. The full, bright moon illuminated the setting, creating shadows that danced to the sound of the night breeze. While they talked about the dreams they had both nurtured throughout life, Henry drew slowly closer. Edward's eyes met his, and in that instant, everything seemed to conspire for love to manifest naturally. I confess that I was left speechless. Truly, I had judged him by his manner, but as we talked, I began to realize that that man was much more than I had imagined. We wandered through the house, exchanging confidences and laughing at the small stories that only true lovers share. I fell silent, watching as he settled with a look that now seemed to hold far more intention. "Come on, I missed you," Edward whispered, his voice choked with emotion and the silent desire that united us. I returned the smile, feeling the sincerity in every word he spoke. "Come on, I missed you too," I replied, knowing that this was not just an invitation for another meeting, but the realization of a feeling that had overcome all the barriers of the material world. This moment carried a natural complicity. Now it was no longer about money or obligations. It was pure pleasure, unhurried, without commitment, driven solely by mutual desire and the sincere surrender of two hearts that met by chance. We spent hours together, talking, laughing, and surrendering to the moment, as if time had stopped to allow our intimacy to consolidate. When it came time to say goodbye, our glances said it all, a gentle smile, a silent nod, and the promise that this was only the beginning. The transformation in Henry's life was evident. The young man, who for so long had seen his value measured in figures, now understood that the true treasure was in the shared emotion, in genuine affection, and in the freedom to love without limits. Edward, for his part, found in Henry a renewal, a youth that made him relive his hopes and rediscover the magic of feeling loved unconditionally. Their meetings became more and more frequent, and their lives turned into a harmonious dance between subtle affections and deep conversations. There was no longer any need for tacit contracts or silent agreements. The love that blossomed between them manifested in every gesture, from the simple act of preparing breakfast together to the moments of shared silence as the city woke up. On a sunny spring morning, while the flowers bloomed in Edward's garden, the two met for a walk in the park. Sitting on a bench surrounded by nature and a gentle breeze, they talked about their plans for the future. Henry, his eyes shining with determination, confided, "Edward, today I realize that everything I once sought, security, approval, financial success, is nothing compared to what I feel when I'm with you. I want you to know that from now on, my value is no longer measured by what I charge, but by the love we are capable of sharing." Edward firmly took Henry's hand, and in his smile there was the certainty that that moment was the culmination of a long journey. "My dear, you have taught me that true value lies in the heart, and I feel privileged to have you by my side, not for a contract but for this connection that goes beyond any transaction." The words echoed through the park, and the world around them seemed to light up with the intensity of that feeling. What was once a relationship based on transient interests had transformed into something lasting and true. Henry, with his decision to abandon charging fees, showed that love can be free, that affection is priceless, and that sometimes renouncing something can be the greatest proof of courage and authenticity. As time went by, the two continued to build their story with patience and dedication. Every day was a new page written with glances, touches, and words that revealed how much they had transformed. Complicity was present in every simple gesture, a tight hug when saying goodbye, a brief kiss that said more than 1,000 declarations, and the certainty that, despite the challenges, that love was capable of overcoming any obstacle. The future remained open, full of possibilities and surprises. Henry and Edward knew that the journey they had begun was only just starting, that every meeting, every conversation, every shared silence was a step toward something greater and more beautiful. And so, amidst meetings and farewells, life went on, leaving an indelible mark between them, a feeling that would transcend time and the conveniences of the modern world. Between affections and renunciations, between glances that met and smiles that said goodbye, their love blossomed naturally and organically, unhurried, without demands, but with the certainty that what they built was living proof that a person's true value is not measured by what they can offer in financial terms, but by who they are, by their capacity to love and to transform the lives of those who cross their path. And so when night fell and the two said goodbye with a hug that spoke louder than any words, they knew that tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new emotions, and the certainty that that story, started by chance and consolidated by love, would continue to be written page after page with the delicacy and passion that only true lovers are capable of sharing.
Comment below what you would do in their place. Would you fight, hide your desires, or give in completely? If you liked it, like and share when no one's watching. And don't forget, betrayal is not subscribing to the channel.